It is Friday, July 9th, 2021, and we are noticed from 12:45 to 1:15. This is a confirmation hearing for Niki Tshibaka, Human Resources Director. We'll go ahead and start with introductions.
Cameron Perez-Verdilla.
Forrest Dunbar. Pete Peterson.
John Waddleton.
Jamie Allard.
Crystal Kennedy. James Allentown.
Christopher Constant.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Rivera.
Niki Tshibaka.
Amy Domboski.
Great, thank you all for being here. Ms. Domboski, would you like to introduce Mr. Tshibaka?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is truly my privilege to introduce the Assembly today to Mayor Bronson's nominee for Human Resources Director. I don't want the Yale graduates to feel bad, but today we have a Harvard lawyer in front of us. It's really remarkable to have someone of Niki's experience and level of education to step into this role to serve the citizens of Anchorage. Not only has he been a civil rights attorney, but he has extensive experience in the EEOC. So we put him before you today for your consideration, and we'll look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Mr. Tshibaka, would you like to continue the introduction?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair LaFrance, and want to thank the mayor for nominating me for this position, and thank you all for considering my nomination today. I'd like to start off with a little bit of background on myself. I am I'm an American citizen, born an American citizen, but I was born in the Philippines, Manila. My mother is from Minnesota. My father is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I lived abroad throughout my childhood in different places in Africa, South America, and Europe. I attended Amherst College with a security political science degree there, and went on to Harvard Law School, where I met the love of my life. And I even today look back and am so grateful to folks like my parents who had a vision back in a time where it was very controversial to have this vision of love that would transcend race, and their love paved the way for mine. I have 5 wonderful children, ages 6 to 16. In fact, my oldest, our daughter Denali, will be 17 tomorrow. So this evening, got to get prepped for the festivities this weekend. Wanted to share a little bit as well about my professional experience. After graduating from law school, I went on to a private law firm in DC. I was a litigation attorney, did work in telecommunications, did work in international law, including human rights related work, was involved in a employment litigation case, did some government contracts, counseling for clients, and a number of other matters. But after about 2.5 years at the law firm, moved on to the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, where I was a senior trial attorney and investigated and sued states and state employers and local government employers for discriminating against employees on the basis of race, religion, color, national origin, or sex, under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I also represented service members, military service members, under what's called USERA. It's an acronym for the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. And those were cases usually involved discrimination by private employers against our service members. For my service at the Department of Justice, I was at one point awarded the Sustained and Superior Performance Award by the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. It was a great honor. After that, I went on to the NGO world, started a faith-based organization, the focus of which was caring for members of our community, but not just our immediate community, but also our global community. In that capacity, we cared for political refugees, the homeless, people impacted by sex trafficking. Also did a lot of leadership development, and did that locally, but also, again, globally, was an invited speaker throughout Africa, South America, Europe during my time. So we did a lot of equipping and leadership development, and raised up people to go out and impact their communities wherever they went and make them a better place. I have about 2 decades of experience caring for people and advocating for people in the private sector, in the NGO sector, and in the public sector at the federal and state levels. I spent about 2.5 years, this is most recently, on the executive team for the Department of Education and Early Development as the Assistant Commissioner. And lastly, I'd just like to highlight my multicultural experience. Obviously, having lived in a lot of different countries, I've had the privilege of meeting people from all over the world, befriending people from all over the world, learning different languages, and I think that's going to serve me well should I have the honor of being confirmed in serving a workforce that has people from all over the world as well. Thank you with that. I'm open to any questions you may have for me.
Great, thank you, Mr. Tshibaka. We have Ms. Allard in the queue.
Thank you. So I noticed on your resume, it doesn't really have human resource experience, but we had a conversation with you, myself and Ms. Kennedy, this week, getting confused on days. And I asked you about that, and your answer was right on. And I would like other members to hear your response of why you are the best person for the job, because you do have that correlation, even though you might not have a degree or specifically worked in that. Can you hit on that a little bit?
Sure, through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, thank you for that question. So with my work at the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division, it was basically investigations and compliance work, which, as you all know, is something the Human Resources Department does a lot of, including involving Title VII related issues and other EEO issues. So that piece is a skill set and a subject matter expertise that I already possess. The Human Resources Director, I believe part of the integral to that role, at the center of that role, the foundation of that role is to care for and advocate for the employees who serve our city and who dedicate their lives to make our lives better. And so that's something I've been doing my entire life in whatever capacity, whatever role I've had, from private practice through my experience in government and in the NGO world. So I bring that to bear here. That's one of the reasons why I was very excited and honored by the mayor's nomination for this position, because I see it very much as a role that is focused on caring for and advocating for others. In addition, the role involves developing people, helping them become a better version of themselves. And that is something that I have a 1.5 decades of experience in doing and have been recognized for by leaders throughout the world. And so I look forward to leveraging that experience to invest in the people most immediately in the Human Resources Department, but also our employees across the municipality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Thank you, Mr. Tshibaka. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. So I've been going through this. Your life has been an amazing adventure. It's incredible. I hope that the next few years will be boring. So tell me about the chili pepper company. Is that still a thing for you?
So yes, through the chair, thank you for that question, Assemblymember Weddleton. I think you're referring to Visa World. So Visa World, I am no longer a shareholder, and I actually gave away all my shares to my fellow shareholders a while ago, about 8 or 9 months ago, during the pandemic, to incentivize them to stick with it, because everybody got hit hard by the pandemic. But when you're in a developing country doing, with a small business, you get hit even harder. So that was very much the brainchild of myself and another business person who'd spent probably about 3 decades at this point working and serving throughout Africa. And as you know, my father's from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I have observed him in his life, how much he's given back to his home country, but also to the continent of Africa. And that was something that was instilled in my sister and I from a very young age. In fact, one of our tribal traditions is your first salary goes to your eldest uncle as a way of reminding you that you're there to also care for your family and have those responsibilities. So I love doing that so much. I did that for every one of my first jobs through my private law firm experience, and my wife even got hooked into doing it as well as part of our being a part of my culture. So Visa World was an overflow of that investment that my father put in my life to invest back in our home continent. And so the idea of the company was to be a social entrepreneurship project that would help raise up Ghana's rural farmers who were among the poorest of the poor, out of extreme poverty, but also in the urban areas to provide job opportunities for women, particularly single women who tend to be more vulnerable in that area, economically at least, and young people. And so that's what we set out to do. And it's been a challenging process. It's hard to obviously oversee a business from across the world, and you have all the challenges of being in a developing country. But the employees that we've had have been fantastic on the ground, and we've been able to help hundreds of rural farmers and by extension their communities. And what we've done, we were at the time, as best we knew, the only FDA approved chili pepper powder production company in Ghana, and developed a solid reputation for ourselves, as small as we are. So my role with that was sort of getting it started, investing in it, and then as needed, the executive team would sometimes call me to get some advice on sometimes personnel issues, but other times more strategy issues and helping develop the business strategy for the company.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Thank you, Mr. Tshibaka. Do you members have any other questions?
I do.
Ms. Allard?
Okay, I heard a rumor. Are you really a prince?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Allard. So I don't know if you would technically call it a prince, but yes, on my father's side of the family, I come from a long line of chiefs of our clan, and in fact, my father's oldest brother, after whom I'm named, my middle name is Niki, that's my tribal name. He could recite our lineage, our chieftainship lineage back about 1,000 years. So I still have it in our family. I think we can go back at least 300 or 400 years. So it's kind of cool to look back and see all my chieftain ancestors going back. Right now, my father's older brother is the chief of the clan.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I see that you're a member of the WorldCap board, and we are in the middle of trying to address homelessness situation here in Anchorage. So I think the fact that you're on that board is probably an asset for us going forward. Do you have anything you've gleaned from your time on that board that might help us or give us any advice?
Through the chair, thank you, Assemblymember Peterson. So just in full transparency, I only recently joined the WorldCap board. It's been just a few months. In fact, I'm in the process of stepping down because I was the Department of Education sort of appointee for that. I've been on the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness board, though, for the last year and a half or so. And I've really enjoyed working with them. In my capacity as the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Education, I was involved in serving our homeless youth. One of the great accomplishments that I'm particularly excited about is early on in my tenure, we were able to partner with a project that Covenant House had been spearheading with other service providers and the Department of Labor to secure a grant that has resulted in about close to $1 million a year in perpetuity now being from the federal government going to combat rural youth homelessness. So that's something I'm particularly excited about. I think, when I look at the issue of homelessness, I look at it from a personal standpoint. My father for a short time was a political refugee and was homeless and had to rely, he and his mother, on the kindness of strangers to house them, and of course of international agencies to provide them with basic necessities. And so serving the homeless has also been a passion of mine for a long time. From the perspective of youth homelessness, that's where I really come at it from my experience there. And I think there's a lot of work to do in making sure that our vulnerable youth are equipped for a world beyond high school so that they don't stay in perpetual homelessness. And there's Covenant House, my house, other organizations are doing a phenomenal job at helping ensure that. The only other advice I would give is I think this is a community issue, a community concern, and I hope that we can all partner together and use some creativity and innovation to serve those who are less fortunate and many of whom might have been like us just a few months ago or even before just the pandemic, and we're just, hit really hard, so.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Do any other members have questions? Ms. Alatel?
Yes, thank you. So could you talk a little bit about how you see the intersection of HR and equity within the municipal workforce, particularly what you may do or things you may think to collaborate with the chief equity officer on?
Through the chair, thank you, Assemblymember Zalato, for that question. I think it's a very important question. So one of my priorities is going to be addressing the issue of diversity. I really appreciated the conversation that the Assembly had with Chief Schrage about that issue. In fact, I talked with him a little bit about it in the hallway afterward. I've met with our Chief Equity Officer already, and we've begun our discussions. He's sent me some documents to review, and we will be meeting again in the future to begin just thinking through together strategically what can be done. One of the things that I just begun, again, I've only been on for a few days, but one of the things I've begun brainstorming is what we can be doing with the APD and the AFD to get more into our schools. Our juniors and seniors are beginning to think about careers and life after high school, and having positive experiences and interactions with our local heroes is, I think, going to be something invaluable, but particularly going into some more of our sort of distressed communities and building more bridges in that regard. I think my experience in the Department of Education and relationships developed and cultivated with the Anchorage School District will prove invaluable in that. I have to look at the data, find out where the obstacles are. My sense from conversations I've had thus far is that it's not so much a lack of necessarily of qualifications as it is just more of a recruitment issue. And I think probably one of the things we need to think about is not waiting so much for the community to come to us, but finding ways for us to go out into the community. And so identifying community leaders who can get our message out to the members of their community and help us find folks who are talented and interested in joining us in service of the municipality, and then working with them to make that happen.
Thank you, Ms. Alatel. Thank you, Mr. Tshibaka. Any other Mr. Presverdia?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on two issues. One is your perspective on the proper sort of place of EEO within the municipality, whether that belongs within HR or separated. And the second question relates to the discussion you were just talking about representation. And aside from representation, sort of the internal culture of the municipality and addressing that culture specifically as it relates to things like systemic racism and being able to have sort of honest dialogue and about that within the municipality. Because I think the challenge is not just recruitment. Is this a place where people feel like they can bring their full selves to work every day and bring diverse perspectives and worldviews? And so I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts about that as well, about how you will gather the data on that as well to determine whether the municipality is functioning in a way that is really representing the values that we have as a city.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, Assemblymember Presverdia. Those are both great questions. You know, I need to review I know that there are some legal memos that have been written on the interplay between HR and the EEO. I can say from the private sector, the two are not necessarily two completely separate entities. They are part of the same integrated entity, and but I have to get some legal counsel as to how our code is structured on that, and we'll follow whatever the law says about that. So I do think that regardless of how that structure plays out, the two have to work hand in glove because the functions overlap substantially in a lot of ways. To your second question, we live in a time that's very divided, obviously, especially on matters of race and equity and other things. I think it's going to be important to foster a safe culture where people can have honest conversations and not feel intimidated in asking questions that others might bristle at. If we're going to have honest dialogues, they need to be honest dialogues. I think that one way to address it is to have some trainings that we deploy throughout the municipality, but not just trainings that are sort of a one-off, 1 hour, 2 hour on a particular day for folks, because that can do something. But if you're trying to change a culture, there need to be action steps that follow to sort of have that sustained impact. So that's something that I imagine I'll be working with the Chief Equity Officer on some level with those ideas. I also think that I have to do a bit more of a review of how our investigations are conducted and how safe people feel filing complaints about issues of discrimination, because culture isn't just changed by talk and training, it's also changed by making clear that we have a zero tolerance policy for discriminating against people because of their sex, their sexual orientation, their gender, etc. So those are at least my initial thoughts. I'll obviously probably have more once I do more of a deeper dive. I hope that's helpful.
Can I just do one follow-up?
Sure, go ahead.
Most of the folks that we have been talking to, it sounds like you're doing the same thing, is sort of starting with an audit, starting with an internal review of what's going on and how it's going, and using that data to make the decisions moving forward. One of the concerns that I have is that the infrastructure for gathering that data may not be there. And so that's one thing that I'd really love to hear from you, is if there are things that you need to have put in place to gather the kind of information that you're talking about. We talked with the fire chief, and we'll probably have the same conversation with the chief of police and others, in that it's more than representation. It's when we talk to the police chief about having a fire department that's representative of the community. For me, it's more than just going out and finding folks to fill those jobs. It's really being honest about what that environment is like, and so I guess the point is that I'm encouraged that you're wanting to do that initial audit and gather that information, because I agree it's more than just training. It's really assessing the internal environment, and then learning about that, and deciding whether there are things that need to change. So thank you.
Yes, through the chair, Assembly Member President, I absolutely agree. I have to get a sense from my folks as to what capabilities we do have and what we don't, and we could go from there. Obviously, Chief Equity Officers, I believe, we've begun doing some work on that too, so I look forward to talking with him about it as well. And the good news is, I absolutely agree. First of all, that part of this is an environment issue. People aren't going to want to come in from the outside if there's an environment that they perceive as hostile to them. But as we bring some of those people in, that can also have the impact of changing that environment as well. And so I think it's going to be a both and two-pronged approach, maybe more pronged. We'll have to see. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. So I don't have any other members in the queue. Mr. Tshibaka, if you'd like to add anything at this time before we adjourn?
Sure. Thank you, Chair LaFrance. I just wanted to thank you all for this time. I look forward to serving you and serving the mayor, serving the people of Anchorage, should I be confirmed. Have a great weekend.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tshibaka. Appreciate your time. And just want to note that Mr. Tshibaka's confirmation will be before us on our July 13 meeting. That's per AM 459-2021. Also wanted to extend a thank you to Mr. Constant for his work in setting up the process in collaboration with Ms. Dabowski in the clerk's office in setting up the first of many confirmation hearings to come. So thank you for that. Thank you all for being here and have a very nice weekend. Oh, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. As we discussed earlier, there will be some slight amendments to the memo. Ms. LaFrance and I will confer with the clerk, and those will be shared with everyone with final details. And make sure you communicate with the clerk if you have any concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Okay, we are adjourned. Trying not to be too hard. I